OK, let's look further at the economic impact of the continued closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Let's cross to Milena in London.
Hello and welcome to Al Jazeera studio in London, where hopes of a speedy resolution to the Iran conflict evaporated again on Thursday after the latest comments by the US president. In Europe, markets were down and the oil price surged once again, up 7% on yesterday to $106 a barrel. And here in the UK, where most goods and materials are transported by trucks and heavy goods vehicles, the implications are massive. Higher diesel prices mean higher delivery costs, something that will ultimately mean higher prices for consumers. Now, in Australia, the government has announced it will make nearly $700 million in interest-free loans available to companies, including transport operators.
These firms are not just being affected by this global crisis, they are essential to Australia getting through this crisis as well. So our government will extend their credit to help them and the farmers and producers who rely on these supply chains to weather the storm. No government can promise to eliminate the pressures the global crisis will impose, but we can be a buffer against the worst of it, a shock absorber in a time of global shocks.
Well, joining us now is the Professor of Economics at the University of Surrey, Golson. Thank you very much for being with us. Now, we've heard the Australian Prime Minister there trying to mitigate the economic impact of the war on people in his country as the markets tumble after that latest speech by Donald Trump. Why have his words yet again had such an impact on the markets?
I think the markets are returning to reality now, right? The reality of a drawn-out, long-term conflict for a while. We're looking at talking to bring to a resolution, which as far as economists go and markets go is always a negative. I think the Australians and others are going to try and make business easier to do now. That may give markets it may give them a little bit of insurance over the next couple of weeks. Probably you will see things still go down, though. But obviously, the problems here are many that need to be fixed.
Professor Golson, stay with us. We'll get back to you in a few minutes. I just want to talk about something that's essential about when it comes to moving the economy, and that's hauliers. They are the lifeblood of the supply chain, delivering goods and materials around the country. Now, the road transport sector moves 80% of all goods and materials across the UK. And since the Iran conflict began, diesel prices have risen significantly. In some regions, as much as 30%. And for large fleets, this can add tens of thousands of dollars to weekly fuel bills. Now, that's led some companies to add fuel surcharges to help absorb this cost. And there's also an additional knock-on effect because container ships have been disrupted by the effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz. So import and export cargo is being delayed, meaning fewer delivery jobs for the haulage industry. Now, one company operating west of London has seen its diesel costs jump 50% in recent weeks. And Camille Nedelec went to see what kind of challenges they're facing.
Logistics firms like this one are the lifeblood of an economy, and the UK is no exception. Everything we drink, eat and wear at some point has passed through a road haulage firm before reaching retail shelves and getting in our hands. Even before the Iran war, these types of firms, especially small family-owned businesses, were running on very tight margins, meaning that these fuel hikes are adding fuel to a fire that was already well underway.
It's a ginormous cost for a company of our size to try and swallow. You're talking £200,000 over the year, the cost of 2 additional vehicles that we no longer can buy because we've just got to pay this additional diesel cost. I'm confident we can continue as we are now, but I'm worried about a lot of other operators in the same industry as us because it will have a massive knock-on impact for all sectors of our economy as soon as more and more operators are unable to get food on the shelves.
The UK Road Haulage Association is calling on the government to do more to lower costs, as well as publish a contingency plan in the event of fuel shortages. This, as spiralling costs for the UK haulage industry will accelerate rising costs elsewhere in the economy. Camille Nedelec, Al Jazeera, Twyford, England.
Well, joining us now from Leicester is Clare Bottle. She is the CEO of the UK Warehousing Association. Very good to speak to you. Thank you for being with us. Now, first off, can you please tell us what kind of an effect have you and your members seen on the supply chain?
Well, as we were just hearing, even though fuel supplies are secure, we're already seeing those rising diesel prices. And the UK is a very open economy. Last year, our goods trade deficit was £243 billion. And what that means is we're really highly exposed to global disruption, not just in road transport, but also those rising costs affecting air freight and shipping. And those costs will feed through to businesses and ultimately to consumers. Companies are going to have to prioritise resilience over efficiency. That means holding more stock, and that will rely on more warehousing buffers to help manage these supply chain shocks.
Well, this is a really important point that you raised, that this will impact on consumers. And can you just paint a picture on how it will affect ordinary people? But we also live in a world where we're used to ordering things one day and expecting to get them the next day. How will this affect that?
Well, as I said, at the moment, we think that fuel supplies remain secure, but people are feeling uncertainty, and uncertainty always prices in extra costs within the supply chain. There's no immediate risk. UK supply chains are very well managed, but our members are handling things like food and medicines. And the longer that disruption goes on, the more that pressure builds. Longer transit times, higher costs, all of that can eat into the shelf life for fresh products and increase the risk of waste. And while it's fairly easy to substitute different foods, that's more difficult with medicines where the supply chains are more tightly controlled. Perhaps there's a bit less flexibility in the substitution of different medicines. And both will depend very sort of heavily on having strong warehousing operations to keep goods moving and make sure that they're in the right place and in the right condition.
Well, Clare Bottle, CEO of the UK Warehousing Association, we appreciate all your insights. Now, Professor Eric Golson is still with us. I'd like to get your take as well on the supply chain issues, because we live in such a globalized, interconnected world now, and you can have parts for one item being manufactured in various different countries. How will the crisis and the war in the Middle East impact on that?
It's just like COVID, right? In the sense that the supply chains are long, and one missing part, whatever that part might be, is going to slow down the manufacture of your phone, for instance, or whatever the item is. And those parts, a lot of them depend on oil as an input. So even if we think about something like a phone, it comes from 30 different countries. Some of those countries are in the Middle East.
30 different countries.
30 different countries. Some of them are in the Middle East. They'll be the war itself will affect their production capabilities, but then you have all the knock-on costs for moving those parts around between different locations. So this is going to be a significant increase in prices and probably also problems for supply chains.
Eric Golson, we'll talk to you more in a minute, because we wanted to put a number on this economic cost of this war. So how much money is being lost by the continued closure of the Strait of Hormuz? The sustainability think tank Solability estimates it is costing the world economy $20.4 billion a day. And that includes oil and gas, other major global commodities, including fertilizers, iron ore and aluminium, as well as container traffic. Now, stay with us, Eric Golson, because I want to get your thoughts on that as well. How much money is being lost? Looking to the future, if I may get you to get your crystal ball out, we might find ourselves in a situation where perhaps this current conflict is wrapped up, the situation in the Strait of Hormuz is not resolved, or perhaps if it's open, it might sporadically close again when the regional conflict intensifies. What are we facing here in the future?
This is the million-dollar question, right? We really don't know how much and how long we're going to be affected by this. The $20.4 billion is a wonderful number. We can use that as a benchmark to talk about the global effects. You're going to have GDP is going to come down 1 or 2% probably globally. Inflation will go up a couple percent. But the longer this drags on, the longer that supply shortage drags on, the more complicated this is going to get for the economy, including fuel rationing in developing economies, which we've already seen.
Oh, well, that's quite a worrying thought to finish on, but we do appreciate it and everything else that you've told us about today. Professor Eric Golson of the University of Surrey, thank you so much. And that's all from me, Milena Veselinovic, and the team in London. Now back to Doha.